Hi, everybody. It's Kelly Just here with the Philosophy Society. It is December 4th, 2024. It's a Wednesday. We're in the Toronto Metropolitan University Library, room 860. And so today we're going to go through, I'd like to finish Synergize, chapter Habit 6 there. But first, I'm going to give a little introduction to the Philosophy Society. We have a new person here today. So why are you here? Your friend brought you. That's a good reason to come, right? Why would you come back, though?
Well, actually, I just heard some theories and kind of introduction about this course, but unfortunately, we don't have this course in our college. So it appeals me to come here to see how it is.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little introduction on what my goals are, right? And if those goals are interesting to you, that would be a motivation for coming back. As fun as Nazanin is, if she's busy doing stuff like building a snowman, you're like, should I come to this Philosophy Society thing? My friend's not here. Why would you come, right? Yeah. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. So, the Philosophy Society is an organization that I started in 2007. I don't know, a long time ago. A long time. Some people, it's like, it's been around longer than they've been alive. So I don't know what to say about that. And so when we talk about philosophy is a discipline that's based on asking questions. And we could say it's antithetical or in contrast to things like religion, where it's not really about asking questions. Psychologically, asking questions is something that we have to, we do and we engage in with our executive function, our prefrontal cortex. It's not really a feeling thing per se. We can maybe talk about the wonder as an emotion and curiosity as a feeling we can have towards things. Whereas in religion, it's more about faith and this sense of like trust, you could say. And that can easily get confusing when violence is involved. It's like, well, where did the violence come from? For whatever reason, right? If people believe that God is supposed to be a peaceful, loving entity that exists and is in part of us and is everywhere. It's beyond time and space, right? And it has some kind of an understanding or plan. Like there's these properties of what God is. And that's okay. Like we can talk about that. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But it's our disposition towards certain things we experience, things we think, right? And being philosophical or wise is to not just accept whatever we hear or whatever we see. It's to use our mind to understand whatever that thing is, right? Now that very quickly comes at odds with most religion. Religion functions psychologically and socially on things like indoctrination, that we don't want people to ask questions. We just want them to accept and to follow through with their beliefs. And one of the psychological mechanisms that enables this is something called faith, right? That you don't have to ask questions. No, that's for over there, right? Let the engineers ask questions.
Like guilty if you think about it. If you say some question about it, like it's forbidden to ask a question.
Yes, and that's a mechanism of indoctrination. Okay, so when we talk about society, what we mean by this is it's social, right? And one of the mechanisms in social groups, we could say, is right, to believe without questioning, to indoctrinate. So being philosophical, though, is not that, for sure. It's about asking questions. And we have this phrase, be Socratic. Right? That's one of the tools we can use in being philosophical, right? It's already, in some areas or with groups of people, they would want to kill me just by my approach, right? And that's like, and that's a problem. So how are we going to figure that out, right? It's a social phenomena, right? Because it's a group of people, and yeah, there's a bunch of factors that are going on. So when we say the Philosophy Society, philosophy is the love of wisdom. That's predominantly what philosophy means. And society, again, it's just like a group. So it's social, and then one property we have is groups. Now, in all social groups, they function in a certain way, just like a building does. I was talking before with Naz about this, that she's an architect of buildings and I'm an architect of social groups, right? And so the way that we structure the group, philosophy, society, we would want it to be wise. And so we have to understand what we mean by wisdom, right? And just in the way that I'm approaching this phrase, philosophy, society, I'm being philosophical. And the act of being philosophical, asking certain questions, conceptual analysis, when we talk about an idea, and we look at what is the meaning of this idea, we're analyzing this idea, right? And so being philosophical is something that you will learn through academically reading the history of philosophy. Plato, Aristotle, Seneca, the medieval philosophers like Boethius. We can go into the early modern period with René Descartes, John Locke, Berkeley. And so we learn this skill, this psychological way, or this behavior of way of thinking about things. And that way of thinking about things is wise, which is different than saying devotion or faith, right? You can have that. I'm not saying don't have it, but like any power, it can be used in a good or bad way, right? So if religion is a power, sure, you can use it or not. I'm an atheist personally, right? And we can explore what that means. And I feel that part of what I would like the Philosophy Society to do is to give refuge to people who have grown up in an extreme religious environment and they are scared to even think in a certain way because they've been taught their entire lives that God is all over the place and God will know before anybody else, right? That's like totalitarianism deep in the brain, right? And that's sad. And so even if you were Muslim, right, you can still, or Christian, how can we be those things in a way that still makes sense, that's still wise, if it's part of what you are, right? My job is not to take it away from you, but to make you stronger in how you do certain things, like how you think about things and what you believe in, right? So that I respect you as a human being. That is something that's important. And I would say that's a wise thing, right? So, we can talk about human dignity in regards to our beliefs. So we all have beliefs. Sorry, I'm just having a meta moment where I'm seeing these things connect together. Sometimes it happens to me because I'm just talking right now, right? All of our beliefs, we have a bunch of beliefs, but I haven't accepted or really thought about all of them. I kind of just have them, right? Through a similar process called socialization, right? There are certain behaviors or ways of thinking that social groups will reinforce. They'll say, we want you to behave this way. We want you to think this way. For example, how boys and girls are socialized when they're younger reinforces certain gender identity. Boys are given like certain kinds of toys with certain colors. They wear blue. Girls have pink and they have like little dolls and stuff like that, right? And so over time, they learn that these ways of playing with things are good for them, right? That same mechanism is used with our beliefs. And so we have many, many, many beliefs, right? For example, one belief could be the world is flat, right? Or that the number 333 is really special. It's like a super special number. If you see that number anywhere, you're going to have a good day, right? What are some other beliefs we could have? We could talk about ghosts. We could talk about telepathy. We could talk about spirit. We could talk about God, right? These are all things that are beliefs, right? And there's different ways that we acquire these beliefs. Now, until you use some mechanism to evaluate these beliefs, are they really your beliefs? What does it mean for something to be yours? If it was just thrown there, you're like, oh, just carrying this stuff, did I really claim it as part of my being or part of my identity? I don't know. Maybe. But I think that there's more integrity to all the things you believe and all the things that you do if you go through it and you understand it meticulously. And then you can say, these things are wrong, these things are correct. And that's what I believe. And that process of evaluation, the process of observing the thing, understanding what it is on its own conceptually, and seeing everything else, right? Is it based on evidence? Is it coherent? All of these properties is what critical thinking is. And so when we have certain skills, one, critical thinking. And critical thinking is tied specifically to being philosophical. Okay, David, go.
So I love what you said. I also, kind of also I have a lot of people, friends, that they are religious, but they are very kind people. I like them a lot. So one of the things, I myself actually participate in some theology, discussion. But the thing is that you just talk about critical thinking. There's a question. Would that be a little bit like being religious and being philosophical? Like at the bottom line, there's some fundamental, if I may use this word, like a contradiction. Because Albert Camus once said, I just quote him. He said it in a artistic or maybe a way. He said that being like religious is kind of like not using your critical thinking.
Yes.
How do you solve this if contradiction, or if there's a contradiction?
Well, you could say maybe it's begging the question that I'm making an assumption in this that I have not proven. And that assumption would be that reason or truth is inherently good, and we have the capacity to achieve that trueness in our thinking and in reality. I think that is something that we could criticize and talk about. And to that response, I would just say that we could argue pragmatism and say that the reason that we're doing that, the reason for reason is it works or it's pragmatic. But also that when we're utilizing thought and statements, it is inherent in the use of thought and statements in itself. And that's different than my experience of the perceptual world or my scientific analysis of the world, right? Because that's about phenomena and my integration with phenomena, which is different than how I'm thinking about things. And so being scientific is the mode of being empirical in a philosophical way, and not just accepting things as we see them, but testing them out. And then being philosophical in a statement or a linguistic level would be through reasoning, right? I don't think it's contradictory. I think that the difference fundamentally between religion and being philosophical is that questioning property and to dismiss that which doesn't make sense. Whereas in religion, you have faith and you just accept that it doesn't make sense, but that's God's plan. It's self-reinforcing. It doesn't have any evaluation mechanism or a way to dispense things that are incoherent, right? And so I think they're two different things.
So how could a religious person apply critical thinking? Because religious doesn't matter what kind of religion, their backbone or the very bottom line is there's something that is already not questionable. So how can they? It seems like they're using a different mechanism or different system than critical thinking.
Yeah. So one of those things would be like, so this would be like a psychological thing. And it's called compartmentalization. Where you separate out different things. Or it's like having a double standard. I feel that the way that we can do this is if you are religious, you have to have a context with that, and being philosophical is greater than the religious belief. And you learn that it's not about taking scripture literally, but it's about deriving meaning from scripture, and then that makes sense. But you're also going to have like ethics, right? So even though scripture might say stone people or burn them, right? You can say, well, that's not actually good, right? And you understand the historical context for which it was written. You say the reason they said this in the Bible or in the Quran was because of the time that occurred, right? They were at war. You know, Muhammad's like, hey, what are we going to do? We just kill the infidels. You know, oh, I don't know, just kill them. You know what I mean? Oh, okay. But then people they're out of that context, and they just assume that means just kill any non-believer, and that's the worship to God. It's like, okay, now we got problems, right? So, but the same you find in the New Testament and the Torah and the Bhagavad Gita. There's problems in there too, because it's the mechanism of how we relate to the text, and that's the indoctrination part, right? And so, yeah. So I think that being philosophical as a greater category than being religious means that you can learn from all religions. You don't have to just be favorable to one, because you can say, yeah, these parts are not very good. This part's good. And they're going to take that. Just like when we look at fiction, if you watch Lord of the Rings, you can learn about Gollum's, relationship to the Ring of Power and how it's made him corrupt. And you can learn that that's not a good thing, right? Which is analogous to Book 2 of the Republic. The ring is in Book 2 of the Republic, right? And which is kind of cool. And so being philosophical, like we said last time, is inherent in your property of being a conscious being. Your capacity for awareness and self-awareness means, and having a short-term memory, a long-term memory, and processing things through language means you can be aware of the things you're thinking, and you can have this bird's eye view on them, and then understand the nature of what is. That's what it means to be human. Aristotle said the good life is a life of contemplation. That's what that is.
But yeah, I agree. I like that. What I'm saying, because questioning, when you talk about critical thinking, when you talk about using rationality, there's a nature of rationality that they just want to question everything.
We'll come next week.
Okay.
Because I
Sure.
have class.
It's okay. I can add you. If she gives me their number, I can add you to the WhatsApp chat.
Message.
She will message.
Cool. All right. Be safe.
So part of the nature of rationality is they don't want to set a limit on what category they can question or not. For example, mathematics, is a great example of using rationality. We cannot set a taboo, say, for this category, you cannot do math. You cannot do mathematics on in this. The nature of rationality. They would like to question everything. Then the risk is I'm just imagining if because some religion, there's some bottom line things you just cannot question because it will. Would that be a risk if you really want to be using critical thinking? It will probably threaten the belief, or shaken the belief. Like Dostoevsky once said, once questioned in his famous novel, he said, if God doesn't exist, then why human beings still want to follow ethics? So I can do whatever I want, because that's a major theme in his famous book, several of them. The other thing is, if there's no soul, then why we still want to do good things? This kind of question or deep question or a question about the roots of human nature, then you inevitably will question maybe some of the bottom line of some religion.
Yeah, that's okay. Like Wittgenstein says that at the end of all our questioning, we hit bedrock and we say, this is just the way we do it. And what he's trying to say is that there's an element of social convention to the way that we even use language. And so in this context, it goes back. This is what the part of the function of the philosophy is, like this specific group. Part of the function is to socialize us to a different code of conduct. And part of that code of conduct is the value for thinking and communicating in a certain way. And the wisdom is that psychologically and socially, we have biases that will inherently lead us to error. And if that's the case, we don't even notice that we're making those mistakes. So the only way to correct the error in one person is to have multiple people, i.e. a group, so that they can self-correct each other. That's why it has to be a group. It can't do it. You can't, psychologically, humans just can't, we're infallible. We make mistakes all the time. All the time. Errors in judgment, errors in thinking. And so if you really care about the quality of your life, the quality of humanity, we have to work together. You can't be arrogant and it's not real. That's narcissism. You can't just say, I know everything, right? And I am not even saying that. I'm justifying what I'm saying. I'm saying the brain has limitations and there's nothing you can do about that. Be grateful that the brain is, because you wouldn't exist. And now accept what it doesn't have, and we can fill in the gaps by working together. And the Philosophy Society is not a specific philosopher. It is the place for all philosophers. If you want to talk about the philosophy of mind, that's all the content. Like, this is almost what it is. This is the Philosophy Society, and the philosophers kind of just grow here. So you can have like Plato, you can have Locke, you can have Sam Harris, right? And because the Philosophy Society promotes a certain way of interaction, like the Philosophy Society is the mechanism that comes before being philosophical to rule out any errors in the way you're thinking, so the quality of what you're philosophizing about is higher. That's the purpose. And so, it's not like this is all content, but this is the social context. And that's what Plato did. Plato had the academy. He had this. He had his own philosophy society. And then what did he do with that? He wrote like almost everything we know about what it means to be philosophical academically was written 2,400 years ago.
Yeah, you put it
makes sense. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of philosophers that have come after him, obviously, but he really got a lot done. And so my philosophy is to recreate a social context so that we have an environment that promotes philosophical growth in a whole variety of ways. And so, for example, you brought up issues of a fascist government hurting people. How do we solve that problem? We have the Philosophy Society, and we get specific experts on that area and in political science to think about it in a certain way with the principles of being philosophical. And most academic contexts already do this as it is, but academics lack a lot of training in psychology, and psychologists lack a lot of training in philosophy. So we need to put it together to make this bedrock of, relation, a safe place where we can relate with ourselves and our mind and our experience, and then we do it together. Everyone's doing it with themselves, and then we do it together as a group. Like how else are you gonna design it? Doesn't make sense. There's no other way. There's no other way to account for the psychological limitations of people and the social situations that occur that, there's different perspectives. Like people can lie. They might not even accurately tell a representation of reality because they have their own self-interest. And so the only way to get around that is to have some mechanism. And this is really the purpose here. So the reason you would come back is because you see the value in this mechanism as a platform to develop ideas and to think about stuff, right? A liberal democracy is not enough. That is just to protect us from tyrants. What we really need is to protect us from our own limitations in ourselves. And the only way to do that is like this, that I can see, right? Unless you put a chip in your brain, but then you're reliant on the chip. What if the chip malfunctions or something like that? Now you're fucked again. There's got to be a way for us to do it on our own if technology wasn't available to us. And there is. This is all independent. You're not reliant on technology. Technology makes it easier. I have the WhatsApp group. I'm talking into the camera and to David technology here, but it's not limited to it, right?
So this is good. I want to ask you, in your social group, in your community, and also you said that you talk about the code of this community is healthy questioning. So or being philosophical. So I want to ask you, is there any taboo in your social community that is not permit questioning, healthy questioning, or anything can be questioned? Or is there any taboo you think it's definitely cannot allow any question?
Yeah, just like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and Elon Musk references this all the time. He says that the challenge is not what is the answer, but what is the right question. And so there is a quality to questions, right? Like you can tell if a student comprehends what you're saying by the questions that they ask. If someone, didn't read the book at all, or just didn't follow along, and they're not, being empathetic, we would criticize them and say, you don't even know habit 5. Or if their goals are mismatched with their trajectory, they haven't learned habit 2. Or if they're just being reactive, they haven't focused on habit 1. And just to go with this information from Stephen Covey, but again, it's not limited to that. This is just supposed to help us in our relations with each other. That's the reason I'm teaching this book is to help us to become a better community, right? That's fundamentally what it is. And so
you're talking about the quality of the question. I agree. I'm more referring to, is there any taboo on topics? For example, some political correctness,
no,
some religion, or some
not at all.
No.
There'd only be a taboo towards like scapegoating, towards like when members make mistakes and they fail, then there would have to be some form of consequence at a social level to regulate the quality of people that are part of the Philosophy Society, right? If you say that you're a member, what does that mean? Does it have meaning? Does it have any weight to it? And so, and so there's certain things that are not good, like the taboo part is not content specifically. Some like again, there's what I put on video, like I'm recording right now so that people can follow along. And then there's what we can deal with as a community, right? And as a community, that's a broader context than what I'm just recording, right? What I'm recording is supposed to be like lecture material, but like if it comes down, because again, like the lecture stuff is one thing, but then there's just like relations between people, right? And these people are part of the Philosophy Society. And so if one person's upset about whatever, we want to give them the tools to manage and deal with their problems. That's really what the purpose of the WISE group is supposed to be. And it's something that religious groups can't really do, right? Because we're going to draw not from scripture, but from like the best practices in psychology, for example, like Carl Rogers' unconditional positive regard. That's important. But at the same time, we have to have some way to regulate how people are interacting with each other, right?
The reason I ask is that you probably know in reality, in the world or in society, there are people get themselves into trouble by saying something, maybe socially canceled. So there's many examples of that. That's why I asked, is there any taboo for discussions?
I don't think so, because like you said it yourself, it's for a discussion. And part of the cancel culture issue is there is no discussion. We talked about that before, right? You're perceived as going against the accepted norm, right? Like if somebody, even if somebody commits a quote unquote a crime, the vilification or criminalization of behavior scapegoats people and doesn't actually explore what's going on, right? And so we want to look at the mental health elements that are involved in that, right? What is, we talked about this like 2 weeks ago or last time. What is the causal mechanism that's in play? And let's understand it. So if there is a problem, we can reduce the frequency of the behavior. And like using the criminal justice system as an example, it's focused on retribution, that I am going to give punishment as a penalty because you have done some harm somewhere else. But to some degree, it's a deterrent, and it's supposed to give some balance to harm being done in society, right? But it's not necessarily looking at the causal mechanism of why the behavior occurred. For example, we have the Mexican cartels, right? They commit really heinous acts towards other people that go against their drug trade or whatever's going on. I was talking to somebody recently, and they said Trump might go into Mexico, hopefully with the support of the Mexican government, and try to wipe out the cartels, right? Which would probably be a good thing if the cartels weren't in power. That's good. But the way that they're going about it, he's like, I have a really simple solution to end the war on drugs. Make them legal. And then you take away all the money that's funding the cartel. And I was like, that is a great idea, right? And then you could focus on real problems like human trafficking and the distribution of guns. Those two things are different than drugs, right? And so that goes back to a belief on the social or moral implications of drugs. Anyways, but that's a different discussion. So, yeah. And so part of the code is questioning, because that's tied to the history of philosophy being philosophical and what it means to be conscious. But then there's also relations between each other, right? And how we can support each other in a community-based context and be there for each other, right? And we can learn a lot from religious groups because they have a large sense of community. It's just that they're lacking the integrity of their belief systems or any evaluation mechanism. And so we can improve on that. And yeah, so that's, yeah. Okay, I think that's good for this small little talk. And yeah, we can get into the chapter. So I'm just going to end this video here, and then I'll start a new one.